All right, welcome to another episode of Breakaway from the Rat Race. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Bob Bernatas. Bob is one of the nation's top franchise consultants who is passionate about helping people achieve the greatest level of satisfaction and success through franchise ownership. With years of experience guiding clients toward top performing franchise brands, Bob provides personalized guidance and support throughout the entire process of franchise exploration. Whether you're looking for an exit strategy from the corporate life or a semi passive opportunity, Bob is here to help you find your perfect match and create a brighter future. On top of that, Bob is going to give us a link for his free ebook at the end of this show. So make sure you stay tuned. And Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Eric. Great to be here.
So this is so we don't talk too much about franchise. A lot of people are aware of franchises, but I think a lot of time it's people are thinking it's a little bit too risky. It costs a lot of money for the franchise fee and all that kind of stuff, and people are not really looking into it that much. They scratch the surface and say, "This is not for me." How would you help people to tell them that this is something that they need to maybe spend a little bit more time with and kind of explore a little bit deeper before brushing it away?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of risk, and that obviously comes up quite a bit. In reality, franchising is really the opposite. I mean, if you decide, hey, one day I want to start a business on my own, that's risky. Most small businesses fail. Mom and pop type businesses, independent brands that you may start. Franchising, if you get in with the right company, the risk is diminished dramatically. I mean, there was a study done by the Chamber of Commerce a number of years ago, a couple decades ago, actually, and they focused on a group of independent businesses that all started around the same time, all started within the same year, and they tracked them for a 5-year period. Concurrently, they also tracked similarly maybe a couple hundred different franchises that all started within that same year as well, and they tracked them for that same concurrent 5-year period. Well, at the end of 5 years, actually, I was pretty surprised. The independent businesses, 48% were still open and operating. I thought it would be less. Franchises, 97% were still open and operating. Now, granted, many of them had turned over and they were in different hands. I think 89% of those were still within the same hands, the same operator, the same owner, but some had turned over. So my point is that franchising is, I mean, it's a proven methodology of doing business. Now, there's plenty of franchises that I would suggest to you, you probably don't want to go anywhere near. And there's quite a few of those. But if you find the right franchise concept, the synergies are, I think, as good as it gets. I mean, I've been in franchising, quick background. I've been in franchising since 1986. I've owned multiple franchise concepts. I broke into franchising way back when in the video industry, if you remember Blockbuster Video or West Coast Video, but I had 5 West Coast Video franchises in the Philadelphia market, lost my mind, went up to New York with them. But was successful with that. You know what happened to that industry. But anyway, I own that. I own several other franchise concepts that I launched and had success with and eventually sold. Been consulting for a couple of decades. I was CEO of a national chain, and I'm currently a franchise investor. So yeah, I get high on my own supply, so to speak. But franchising is just, in my opinion, a far safer way to get involved in business.
So how does it compare in terms of the level of involvement that you would have to do? I know we mentioned in the intro that you don't have to necessarily quit your corporate life in order to do this. You could do something kind of like on the side. So how does that part work?
Sure. Well, I will tell you, Eric, most of my clients, probably 80%, are not interested in walking away, at least for the time being, away from their corporate job. Most of my clients fall in mid management range up to upper level management to C-suite execs. that are maybe working 60, 70 hours a week, and they would like to potentially create some off-ramp from corporate America, some eventual off-ramp from corporate America. And more and more brands have realized that they can cast a much wider net if they look for people who do not want to just leave their job, but allowing people to stay in their job and start building something on the side and building an opportunity for themselves, be it for a year, 5 years, 10 years, but eventually have that off ramp if they want to step away. So more and more of these companies have started developing semi-passive platforms. It's really become prevalent over the last 10 years, very much so over the last 5 years, which simply means they've developed the tools or platform necessary to support you at a higher level. Various things. I'll give you an example. If it's a service-related business, maybe it's a national call center that handles all the inbound calls, so you don't need to have admin. I'll give you another example. There's one of the brands that I work with. I've placed quite a few people in, but they actually they'll handle the inbound calls. They'll handle the billing. They'll handle insurance processing, and it's a medical related type concept. So as a franchisee, you can put 10, 20 hours a week into this brand and still build a very viable business. And it's not such that, you start, let's say you're putting 15, 20 hours a week in the early stages. As time goes on, you're putting less and less time in. You're not putting more time in. If you want to stay in a job forever in corporate America and just have a second income stream, that is certainly doable. But what I find most executives that I work with, if they can get out of corporate America, they'd rather take that path.
Oh, yeah. So I can, the other question, I guess, maybe you can tell me kind of like what are some of the other objections that people have, but I can imagine you're a VP of something, operations at a big company. And yes, you are working many hours, but it's kind of like you feel pretty good about your job and you have a status. And now you quit your job and then you end up being like a franchise owner at and making sandwiches at so
Right.
kind of quite a level down, right? So
Right.
how do you what's the transition like? Obviously I'm exaggerating, but what's the transition like when someone goes from corporate life to at a pretty high executive level and all the way sideways to a business owner?
Right. And great question, by the way. That I'm glad you brought that up. Typically, you're doing the same things. Franchise companies love the skills that people develop in corporate America. And to be able to utilize those skills, it comes down to people skills. I'll tell you what franchise companies are not looking for. They're not looking for specific skill sets having to do with whatever the service is. And I will tell you also, everything's service related these days. The product related franchises or companies you typically want to stay away from unless they're combining a product and a service together. You don't want to compete against Amazon. But these companies have if they accept someone as a franchisee, if someone's coming from corporate America, the skill set that person brings to the table is very valuable in the franchise setting. Franchise companies are simply looking for people with basic business acumen. They're looking for people who are smart. They're looking for people who have people skills. And they're looking for people who have drive and want to build something and have the financial capability to execute upon their model. So I have so many of my clients coming from corporate America, be it tech or be it healthcare, whatever it happens to be, and getting into things that have potentially nothing to do with what their backgrounds were. But they have the ability to understand key performance indicators. They have the ability to read a P&L. They have people skills so they can manage people. In franchising, the difference is if you're doing something in corporate America and you're doing it, let's say you're an engineering position and you're just doing your thing by yourself. That may not be the ideal fit for franchising, but anybody who especially is in a management position, they're managing other people because that's all you're doing. You're leveraging people in franchising. the franchise concepts that are more consulting based franchises where you are the product, like what I'm doing right now, is linear income. When I do this, I make money. When I stop doing this, I stop making money. That's why I also invest in franchises for residual income. But the people who are coming into coming from corporate America and into franchising, who have management skills, those skills translate incredibly well into franchising. What I try to do, considering most of my clients are coming from corporate America, and they're looking to replace their income, if not substantially exceed their income. I focus in really, I become kind of one-dimensional in some respect, in that I'm focused on ROI, earnings. I don't give a damn what the widget is, as long as it's something that's ethical and provides valued service to the community. And I focus on semi-passive concepts because that's the bucket that most of my clients fall into. So if someone comes into, I start working with someone and they say, Bob, that's what I'm looking for, I show them the best financial opportunities in franchising that will meet the budget that they're looking for. And if they say, hey, I'm working 40, 50 hours a week now, I might be able to scrape out 10, 15 hours a week, but I don't want to have to do that forever because I'm going to be killing myself to do it. Then that's what we look for. Concepts that you're only going to have to put that much time in, meaning they developed enough tools to support you with only putting in 15 hours a week. But eventually that time is going to become less. But like I said, what I find with most of my clients, as soon as they get to a point where either the profitability from the company, from their franchise, is reaching or exceeding what they're making in corporate America, most will walk away.
Okay. So it sounds like there are a couple of franchise opportunities where you would kind of like become the products, and they're kind of like hands-on, a little bit more hands-on. But there are definitely a lot of other opportunities where you're not hands-on. They're looking for you to for your skills for people management, understanding how to run a business, much more than you don't have to put an apron and start making sandwiches. They're looking for you to manage the process, manage the business.
Correct. And putting on the apron, I would never do that to my clients.
Well, that's just because I know that I know people that had franchises, Subway
Right.
franchises. I think I'm allowed to say Subway, but and then they were wearing the aprons.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Look, food is difficult. I mean, you are managing, you're trying to balance labor costs, your rent, and your food costs. And there's always a tremendous amount of waste. Typically, you're dealing with single-digit profit margins in food.
Yeah.
I'm not a proponent of food. I don't steer my clients in that direction unless they're absolutely insistent on going in that direction. And there are some good ones out there.
Yeah.
Food can be very, very fickle. I'll give you a quick anecdote. One client that I'm working with, and you named the franchise, and she owns 4 of those, or just got out of owning 4 of those that she had for a number of years.
Uh-huh.
She got to a point where she shared with me, she was making about $85K a year.
Oh,
that's it. And she was putting in a 60-hour plus effort into running those franchises. Yeah. Food is difficult. So, I'm working with her right now, and she's astounded to be able to look at some of the things that I'm showing her, that she's going to put a lot less time in and end up making a lot more money. Yeah. But there's so many concepts that don't require, the risk is lower, the profit margins are a heck of a lot higher. I'll give you an example. I love the service category. Anything having to do with home service is a very hot category right now. A lot of opportunity in that category. And there's what's happening in that category is that you have a phenomenon where, number one, it's a very fragmented mom and pop industry that's ripe for roll up. So you see more and more franchise brands stepping into that arena and taking market share away from the mom and pop operators, bringing a much greater level of sophistication and technology and so forth. You also see the baby boomers, who were the do-it-yourself generation, who have pretty much aged out of that at this point. So they're now hiring other people to do it. Younger generations, their attitude for the most part is, hey, my time's too valuable. I'll hire somebody else to do that. But you also see young people aren't going into the trades any longer. So it's leaving a real void. What I like so much also about that particular category, I mean, return on investment is usually really stellar. And scalability in a concept like that, or a category like that. For instance, I placed a lot of my clients over the last maybe 2.5 years in a concept. Not going to name it, but they do gutters. They install gutters on homes, and you'd think pretty innocuous. It's not really a sexy business. That's okay. It's a moneymaker. I mean, the unit economics on that brand are phenomenal, and it's typically you're dropping a 30% profit margin to the bottom line, and those sorts of things. But the scalability of those sorts of things, because you can buy, for instance, it might cost you, $175,000 to get launched in that brand and up and running. But if you buy a second territory, a second franchise, in effect, your cost is 40 grand for the second one, 30 grand for the third one. Now you tripled the size of your territory, tripling the number of households in your territory, tripling what your potential income could be with that concept without spending a lot of money. So that's called horizontal scaling. But then there's also the opportunity to vertically scale and eventually add another brand to your portfolio that is similar, that ties in nicely with the first brand. Could be something outdoors related. Maybe it's a fencing brand. And now you're introducing a second brand to the same customer base that already knows and trusts your first brand. You're gaining economies of scale. Your cost of customer acquisition is going down.
Yeah. So if you have like 200K, let's say, to invest in a franchise, so what are what do you think are the top franchise opportunities that would generate like significant returns, and what would be these returns? What can we expect in terms of returns?
Sure. Well, I can't name the brands and talk about the returns, but I can give you, for instance, like that gutter concept. I can share with you what is in their FDD, their franchise disclosure document, or item 19, which is their income disclosure. Again, that concept is in the 200K range to get into, but they are showing a top line of 1.7 and dropping about 30% to the bottom line.
Really?
Yeah. On a $200,000 investment.
Per year.
Per year. Correct.
Okay. Wow.
Per
and
year.
200K, that's investment in the franchise. Does that include the reserve for the ramp up? Does that include the material?
Yeah. Typically, now with that brand, it may show, and usually they show a range of, and with that brand, it might be, and I can't remember exactly what it was. Maybe it's 140 to 240 in terms of the opening costs. And the variables will be, hey, are you buying the vehicle, or are you going to finance your first vehicle? They always include some level of ramp up working capital built into that as well, be it 3 months or whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty much included, not the vehicle, because they would assume that you would probably finance it or lease it.
I'll give you another example. Okay, I mean, this is taking a little step up. There, I just bought one myself about 2 months ago. I bought another franchise. And actually, in this case, I was working with a client who happened to be a local client. He lives about 45 minutes from me, and I showed him a brand that he absolutely fell in love with. But he didn't have enough cash to do it properly. So I raised my hand and said, I really like this brand as well. I will invest with you. So I did. We started talking about it, and then we started talking about 3 units as opposed to 1 unit. I brought in a couple of other people that I know, and they invested, and we acquired 6 units with this brand.
Yeah. But
the reason I bought this brand, first, I'll tell you, it's in the health and wellness category. It's a men's health concept.
Okay.
It's about, they show in their item 7 of their franchise disclosure document a launch range, a startup range of 224 to 389. So in the 300 typically range, maybe low 300s. But the unit economics that they show in their item 19 of their franchise disclosure document reveals they show 1.8 million top line.
Yeah.
over 600 bottom line.
Wow.
Now, again, these are unicorns. There's not a lot of things I can show a client like that, but if someone
Sounds like
said
you have
to
a
me,
whole farm of unicorn over there.
no, I have a few. I have a few, and I love it when I'm working with a client. The client says to me, "Hey, Bob, just send me the best financial opportunities. I don't care what the widget is. Something that I can do on a semi-passive basis. Let's not focus on the widget as long as it's ethical, provides a valued service to the community. Show me the best financial opportunities, the best ROI that you can possibly show me." Those are some of the brands I would show.
Yeah. So one thing, so that's 600K net, the bottom line for your men's health franchise.
Mhm.
So is there any other fees that come after that, or this is something that you can really kind of like split up, distribute to the partners?
Sure. Yeah, well, let me say this. That's assuming that the franchisee, because they all assume the same thing, that the franchisee is going to be the owner operator. If you're not going to be the owner operator, call it $100,000. Be generous. Call it $100,000 for somebody to manage it for you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we're taking with the 6 units that we bought. We'll open the first 2 at the same time. So we're splitting that salary across 2 units, and eventually that salary will be split across 6 units.
Okay.
But then after that, whatever your royalty fee is. Now, some franchises, when they lay out and they'll show something in the item 19, they may disclose, okay, this doesn't include the royalty fee. May or may not. In some cases does, some cases it doesn't.
Yeah.
But the royalty fee in this case is 6% on this brand. But yeah, that typically when they're showing that, whatever you can drop to the bottom line, that's distributable to shareholders.
Okay. So the 600K assumes owner operator. That means that, you're going to pay, you were mentioning $100,000. That's the salary for the person that's going to manage this whole thing.
Yeah, that might be a little aggressive, but that's fine. Be conservative.
I want that person to be well paid so I can sleep at night. I don't have to worry about it. So I want a highly intelligent person to be able to do that. And the royalty fee, so it sounds like you have to do some digging to make sure that the royalty fee, if there is a royalty fee, and make sure that it's taken away somewhere in the top. Otherwise, you have to take it from the bottom.
Yeah, and that will be clearly defined in the franchise disclosure document.
Okay. And the financial disclosure document, my understanding is that this is reviewed by the SEC. Is that right?
Oh yeah, franchising is highly regulated. I mean, franchise companies that don't, I call it fly straight, or they're fudging a bit. Not only can principals of the company end up in jail, but salespeople of the company can end up in jail. So it would be foolish for franchise companies to do it. Now, I'm not saying it never happens. Look, there's over 4,000 different franchise companies out there. I would suggest to you, I wouldn't go anywhere near 2/3 of them. Not saying they're bad concepts, but I wouldn't feel comfortable putting my clients into 2/3 of them.
Yeah.
Then you have another third, which are good concepts, but then you have a certain percentage of them which are exceptional opportunities.
Yeah.
The difficulty when you're talking about franchising is timing, getting into the franchise at the right time. So people often talk about, they ask me about Crumble Cookie. They ask me about Orange Theory.
Yeah.
Those opportunities are over for the most part. When you start hearing about a brand, usually the opportunity is over. All the good territories are sold out. The last thing you want to go into is a tier 2 territory. You want good A level territory.
Yeah.
And when you look at certain things, I mean, when you start looking at the unit economics on an Orange Theory or Crumble Cookie, there's plenty of concepts out there that are far more impressive from an ROI perspective, but the difficulty becomes finding the right brand at the right stage of its growth. You want enough of a growth pattern to know that the brand has been proven already.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's too mature, all the good territories have already been taken, especially if it's a sexier brand like this men's health concept that I'm talking about. Right now, it's currently the fastest growing brand in the country.
Oh, wow.
And consequently, I mean, franchise investors are buying it up and it's disappearing all over the country. I even had to, I'm in southeastern Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes west of Philadelphia. everything before I can even react, everything, and I get the inside track on this, everything got sold out in my market.
Wow.
So I had to go 2 hours north. So I'm in North Jersey with the 6 units that we bought.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you find the perfect like franchise fit? I'm sure like, there's something, it's not just, you have to have a little bit of, you have some personal kind of like fit that you have to have with that. You don't want to invest necessarily in everything. You have to have do you have to have a personal connection with the brand that you're representing, that you're franchising from? Or you don't
Me,
care, you just care about
me
the number?
personally. Well, I mean, first and foremost, I'm looking at the unit economics on any
Okay. Yeah.
brand. Do I look at the management team? What have they done previously? One commonality that any of my clients will see if I engage with them and we work together is that any brand that I show won't be standing on its own. There will be something bigger behind it. It's either owned by a larger entity and there's plenty of capital behind it. And usually there's a management team that has been there, done that before, and built other franchise organizations. Or there's a real strong FSO behind it. That stands for franchise sales organization.
Okay.
Now, it sounds as though like they don't have your best interest at heart, but I can tell you with certain FSOs, they're unbelievably selective with the brands that they bring in. And if they accept a brand into their portfolio and that brand checked all the boxes, they can put that brand across the country pretty rapidly.
Yeah. Also, some of these brands, I mean, you mentioned earlier that some of these brands, you may not, when you get early enough, these brands, you don't know they even exist. So it would be kind of like if somebody would have approached me for Orange Theory, when it got started, I would say, well, there's plenty of gyms going around. Like, why would I invest in Orange Theory?
Right.
I'd say, well, there's low barrier to entry because, yeah, they own this very special program, blah, blah, blah. But any gym can do what Orange Theory can do. So how do you? It must be a little bit. There must be a little extra concern. What kind of due diligence you have to do? What kind of personality risk profile you would have to kind of like jump into a brand that you don't recognize, and then to make sure that it's going to be successful.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic question. I mean, honestly, I will tell you that I probably would have rejected Orange Theory at the beginning, simply because I'm not big on brands that are first to market with a concept. Now, if you look at what Orange Theory does and you break down the 3 modalities that they employ in their model, they're all successful in boutique fitness. So in theory, it looks like it should work pretty well. And obviously it did. But I prefer to get involved or work with brands that the concept is already proven, not necessarily with the brand, but has another brand or 2 or 3 already had success. I want to see a proven model. And often the best opportunities come from not the first to market with something, but the best to market with something. When a really strong management team that understands franchising comes along, they see a concept that is having a lot of success and they just do it better. They put a better model together. And there's real capital behind it. That gives me a much greater level of comfort.
But that kind of goes back to my questions, like how do you know that it's a good fit? Because if I don't know anything about the gyms, I don't know that this is a good concept or a bad concept. I don't know what the market needs in terms of these kinds of boutique fitness club. So how do you know, like, or do you just stay clear? Well, I don't know anything about gyms, so I'm just going to stay clear of all the fitness and gym and all that kind of stuff. I know a lot about cookies, so I'm going to go and go for it. Find the best crumble cookies I can find.
Right.
So does that play a role in the selection of a franchise?
Yeah, but are you talking from your perspective or my client's perspective or from my perspective?
A person in general, someone that is interested in franchise, interested in what you're offering.
Well, that's why somebody would work with someone like me, and Look, I've been in the industry since 1986. I understand the industry. I've seen so many of these brands come and go, and there's no replacement for experience.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is when a lot of people start looking at brands, and if they try to look for them on their own, the
Mm-hmm.
first step, typically they're going to the internet and they're going to do searches on the internet. They're landing on portals. A lot of franchise companies pay to be on those portals. They're not showing you what's behind the curtain. They're showing you what they want you to see. I mean, you do that for a couple of months, you're ready to blow your brains out. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And you can look at a massive number of franchises, but you get nowhere. So for instance, my process is I work backwards, in that if I work with a client, first thing we're going to do, I'm going to ask them to complete a confidential questionnaire. It takes 20, 30 minutes to do, but it gives me the initial information I need on them to start doing my job properly. A lot of preference questions. There's some financial questions, not too intrusive. Then I do a consultation with them. On the consultation, we review the confidential questionnaire together. It generally takes about an hour, maybe a little bit more. We go through that together. I'll have lots of questions for them. They'll have questions for me. I may flow some trial balloons by them, different categories of franchising, to see how they react to those categories. After that, I take all the information that they shared with me by way of the confidential questionnaire and the consultation that we did. I create a summary. Usually it's 2 or 3 pages for my own internal use. I use that to start matching them with companies. The first thing I do is I go to my preferred list, the list of brands that I've developed, that for no other reason, ROI, earnings. I don't focus on the widget.
Your unicorn farm.
And yes, there you go. Perfect. And semi-passive models. And that's where I check first. But then I expand the search based on some of the information that they shared with me, and I'll look at a lot more brands. So by the time, I may have looked at 100, 200 brands by the time we get together again. But when we do get together again, I'm going to try to whittle it down. I don't want to try to overwhelm people, maybe to a half dozen brands that I think will be a good fit. On that brand review call, we spend about 75 minutes together on that call, and I'll reveal the brands. We'll talk about them. I'll answer any questions they have. I will give them my opinion on those brands. And then I'll say, Mr. Client, let's try, or Mrs. Client, let's try to whittle this down even further, maybe to the top 2 or 3. I don't want you to be overwhelmed trying to investigate too many at once. Once they tell me the 2 or 3 that they like the best, then we talk about how are we going to take a deeper dive into those brands and understand them. And often it's involves introducing them to the brands, and the brands take them through a structured process. It's a learning process. They're learning about the clients learning about the brands, and I stay with them, and we are talking on a regular basis as they go through the investigation of those brands. I also help with financing. I work with all the top financing sources to the franchise industry. Rare that I can't get somebody financed.
Okay, well, that sounds good. And then, so they get the financial document disclosure, they kind of review that, and you review that with them, any kind of like red flags and stuff like that. And what's the due diligence process after that, before kind of like getting all that signed up and selecting a region or a market?
Sure. Well, I mean, part of it is what you just mentioned. They typically will review the franchise disclosure document with the client. I'll be happy to step in and give guidance there as well. I always recommend to my clients, and about half of them will take the recommendation, half of them don't, use a franchise attorney. I mean, if you're going to have somebody review the documents for you, you do not want it to be just a run-of-the-mill, contract attorney. They don't understand franchise. Very, very different. There's a lot of things franchise companies are not going to budge. They're not going to change their documents. Can there be movement in certain areas, especially when it comes to territory, where it really matters? Perhaps. So, but if you have a franchise attorney, the main thing it's going to do for you is give you peace of mind to do a review of all the documents.
Okay, and then after that, then eventually you're ready for the fund to get this funded, and then sign your sign your
Yeah, I mean, really, let's say it's a concept that is $400,000 to launch, and the client says, "Hey, I can put $100,000 into something." Well, I work with them to try to get them financing for
Okay.
the rest. There's lots of entities out there that really specialize in franchise financing.
Yeah.
Lots of different vehicles that could potentially be used. So
Yeah.
once I work with them and they're able to secure the financing, then they're ready to move forward with that particular franchise. Typically,
Okay.
what a franchise company will do is they're looking for you to pay the franchise fee up front. Now, let's say we seek SBA financing.
Yeah.
SBA typically is going to ask for you to put 20% down or pay the franchise fee or fees, whatever's involved there. But SBA, and then you get a pre-approval. So if I introduce you to an entity that helps you with that whole SBA process, they usher you through the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
They can typically get a pre-approval for you in 48 hours.
Oh, well.
That pre-approval, as long as you gave them accurate information, that should be good as gold. And then when you are actually getting closer and you sign the franchise agreement and you're ready to roll, then that entity will also farm your deal out to multiple banks to try to get you the best terms possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Lots of other ways people can utilize their 401k or IRA. There's something called the 401k rollover, where you can roll funds from a 401k or IRA into a franchise without taxation, without penalty, without interest.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
and a lot of accountants don't even understand it. I find it fascinating, but they don't. But it's been something that's been used in the franchise industry for many years and really popular.
And direct, like you have a direct to the franchise business, so you don't have to go through a separate custodian to do that. You can just go directly from your E-Trade or TD Ameritrade.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the companies. There's several companies that I trust that do this. For instance, that the Rob's program, the 401k rollover.
Okay.
I'll introduce clients to that if they're interested in that, and they'll explain the program to them. And if it makes sense, if it's a fit, they'll walk them through the entire process.
Okay.
And tell them exactly.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize you would be able to, get so much financing, and that you would be able to roll your 401k. So that's great for people, again, that are in the corporate life, that want to get out of it or step their toes slightly outside. And so that's a good idea. So I think that's going to be very helpful to people. So Bobby, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best place for them to get a hold of you? And I think you also promised us a copy or link to your free ebook. So maybe that's a good time to give us that as well.
Sure. So the best way to reach me is my website. It's franchisewithbob.com. Pretty simple, franchisewithbob.com. And if you reach out to me through my website, you can reach out to me through there, and I'll be happy to send you a free ebook.
Excellent. Okay, so you send you an email, or there's a page where you can say, contact us. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Give me a call or send me an email, and I'll be happy to send you a free ebook. And I'll be happy. I mean, have a brief conversation with anyone to assess their situation and see if it makes sense for us to work together. And I'll be happy to give them some guidance there.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. So thank you, Bob, for sharing all that information. And
you're most welcome.
Most of luck.
I absolutely enjoyed it. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you for listening to Break Away from the Rat Race with your host, Eric Martel. If you want to share your story and experience with our listeners, please message us on Facebook at Break Away from the Rat Race. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast on iTunes.